Visit gpfcircle.com to purchase the complete audio package from Rising and Falling Powers, the Geopolitical Futures Conference held in New York City. Again, visit gpfcircle.com to purchase the complete audio package.
Spain is in the midst of a crisis with what's happening in Catalonia. For many people, this issue has come right out of left field. They didn't really understand or even know about this independence movement that's been festering for decades and hundreds of years even. What happened in the Spanish Civil War? Obviously, there's a history here that doesn't actually go back that far, and we realize this issue's been on the front burner for a long time. You have a unique perspective on this. Why don't you unpack what's happening there?
Well, look, Spain is a really interesting country when you think about Spain connected to the rest of Europe. I think it was Edmund Burke who said something like Spain is a whale that sort of beached on Europe. It's different. It's a bunch of different things that got cobbled together into one nation. And if you read the Spanish Constitution, it's very confusing because it will say in one breath that there is one unified Spanish nation and that the Spanish government exists to protect that. And also there are a bunch of regional autonomous regions with their own nations that also have to be respected. And it goes back and forth between these two things. And so you have Catalonia, we can talk about the Spanish Civil War, we can talk about the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. The Basques were more famous for the terrorist attacks that they conducted. Of course, the Basques had less support for autonomy and independence in Basque country. Catalonia was a bigger movement, so they didn't have to resort to that kind of political theater in order to gain support for their cause. But this goes back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And that part of Spain has always been wealthier than the other parts of Spain, especially the interior of Spain. It's very, very poor. The land it's not great for agriculture. Spain is just divided into a bunch of different regions, and Catalonia, or at least a significant chunk of Catalonia, has said, well, we're tired of sending our tax dollars to Madrid. We're 20% of GDP. There's no reason that we shouldn't be our own country. Of course, also complicating all this is that even though the most recent illegal independence referendum, it was something like 90% or something like that voted for it, that was only about 40% of the population. And there are hundreds of thousands of people in Catalonia, especially in Barcelona, where there are business interests between Spain and Catalonia that they stand to lose, that are against independence and are now sort of caught in between. And Spain is reacting very heavy-handedly. So that's sort of the broad picture of what's going on.
Okay, what ultimately is at the heart of the issue?
The heart of the issue is that Catalonia considers itself a separate nation from the rest of Spain. I have to unpack that a little bit because we use nation and state as synonymous terms now. A nation is really just a group of people with a similar language, cultural system, values, all those other types of things. A state is the government that actually maintains order, law in a particular territory. And because the most common type of state that we have in the world today is the nation state, which is a government that derives its legitimacy from representing the people, we often use these terms interchangeably. Catalonia really has never been a fully fledged independent state of its own. But it has always had its own unique national consciousness. It is always, well, I shouldn't say always, but for hundreds of years, even maybe a millennia, we could say, they've had a separate language, they've had a separate economic system, they have wanted and tried to get independence all over the place. When you think about even Spain, the things that we learn about in textbooks about Spain, it's like, oh, well, they got rid of the Moors and the Muslims, and then in the late 1400s, there was a union between King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, Castile and Aragon, and they all came together, and this is Spain. It wasn't Spain, it was a marriage between two monarchs because things were so bad and they hated each other so much that they had to marry each other and have kids with each other so that those would be the rulers and everybody would have some stake in the game, right? So this is just this story playing out. And if you look at Spain, it's made a lot of great strides in recent years, but you still have interior Spain, southern Spain, massive unemployment, a lot of economic problems, and Catalonia is doing pretty well. And Catalonia looks around at the rest of Europe and sees all these other little movements popping up and says, hey, why not us? Why can't we go this ourselves? If Catalonia was an independent nation, it would not be the smallest or the poorest nation in Europe. Why can't we claim our place in Europe?
So from the Spanish state's perspective then, obviously letting Barcelona and Catalonia move off on their own would be economically detrimental to Spain.
It would be economically detrimental, but it's deeper than that for Spain. This is an existential threat to Spain as we know it today. And we see this in different countries all around Europe. Like Scotland leaving the United Kingdom, that's an existential threat to the United Kingdom as we know it. These autonomy referendums that just happened in Italy over the past weekend, we can't call those an existential threat, but there has been an autonomy, secessionist, even an independence type movement in northern Italy for a while now. And it's instructive, I think, to look at how a lot of these different countries reacted. I think the UK, one of the reasons they let the Scots have their referendum is because I think the UK was a little bit less afraid of the results and thought that they could weather it. I think Spain wasn't so sure what was going to happen. And Spain also is so precarious. It's not just a couple different things. Like Spain is literally 17 or 18, even 19 different autonomous regions, multiple different nations existing underneath it. If they let Catalonia go, well, what about the Basques? What about all these other places in Spain? So Spain had to crush this. The problem for Spain is that in crushing this, they may have just made the problem even worse, because it was really split 50-50 probably. And now you have a generation of young Catalonians who are going to grow up watching Spanish police beat Catalan grandmothers in the street. I bet you that if the UK had sent English police to go beat Scottish grandmothers in the street to prevent them from voting in their referendum, maybe Scotland would vote for independence. So Spain is trapped. Spain has to maintain this kind of order. That's why they fought the Civil War. That's why Franco had to crack down so many times. It's why there was almost a military coup in Spain in the early 80s. At the same time, the very things they have to do to keep that state together also drive it apart.
Interesting. Okay, so given that then, what is the path that we're on?
The path that we're on is that Catalonia is not ready for a civil war. Catalonia has and this is where it gets down to brass tacks. Like if you want to resist an outside force, you have to be able to defend yourself. Catalonia is not prepared for that, and they don't have enough of the population yet for a mass movement of civil disobedience. They have a regional police force of about 17,000 people. Spain has an army, a navy, an air force, National Guard, you name it. They can go in and declare martial law and do whatever they want to do. And I think that's where we're headed, honestly. I think that the current Catalan government, which is pro-independence, wants that. They know that's the only chance for them to increase the number of people who support Catalan independence. It's the only chance for them to try and get international intervention into the conflict. I don't think they're going to get the critical mass they want. I don't think that there's going to be international intervention in this conflict unless the Spanish go completely crazy, and I don't think they're going to do that. I think what's going to happen is that Spain is going to go in and they're going to roll some heads and they're going to arrest some people. And I think that this will quiet down for a while. But again, I think that in that they will sow the seeds for future problems, because I think a whole generation will grow up in Catalonia remembering this moment and will start preparing for that moment. So I think you'll see some more violence now. I don't think it'll be huge, but certainly it will be on the news. But I think the real deeper thing here is, what is the future of Spain? And it's not just a Spanish question here, because here countries like Italy, even countries like Germany that have their own little regions that want to think about these things, they're all watching. They all watch Scotland and they all sort of breathe a sigh of relief. The Scots voted, they didn't want to leave. Now the Catalonians aren't even allowed to vote, and they're raising a lot of problems about it, and everybody's sort of watching precariously. And I think the rest of Europe will react to how Spain deals with this.
So, as you said, they're almost sowing the seeds of, the violence that comes next. Is terrorism around the corner in this kind of a situation? If they bottle up the political movement that's happening, is terrorism just the next, logical outpouring of that political expression?
I don't think so. And historically, when we look at Catalonia, that has not been the way things have gone in Catalonia. It's really Basque Country that has done that, and that is in part because overall sentiment in Basque Country is less strong than in Catalonia. So a smaller, more radicalized section of the population has had to rely on terrorism in order to try and provoke that kind of stuff. Catalonia, I think the national consciousness is actually much stronger than that. They don't have to go that route. It's going to have to be a long game for them. I don't think that overnight they're going to be able to just declare independence unless the EU changes its mind and wants to welcome it into the family of European nations. But no, I don't think that terrorism is around the corner. I think that the thing that you really have to think about is that over time, civil disobedience, economic issues, like will Catalonia start pulling out of the rest of Spain? Will Catalonian businessmen not want to make deals with Spain and instead look to other countries in Europe? Just slowly in small ways over time, will that change the way things are going? This national consciousness has grown in the last couple decades. After Franco left and after these regions got a little bit more autonomy, in Catalonia they said, okay, we're going to teach our kids the Catalan language. And then 20 years later, people were more comfortable speaking Catalan than they were speaking Spanish. I think you're going to see a similar type thing now over the next 20 years. And the thing that it's going to be is that, we don't really feel like part of Spain. Spain didn't respect us. They say our referendum's illegal. We think them beating our people in the streets for just wanting to have a vote is illegal. And for Spain, it's kind of trite to go to Don Quixote, but story of Don Quixote is that he charges at the windmills because he wants to preserve his nobility. I think as Spain charges into battle against the Catalonians, they're doing the same thing. They're fighting for this idea of Spain that has been haunting Spain for centuries, and they're holding on to it with their knuckles because they don't want to let it go. And the harder they hold on to it, the more Catalonia is just going to slip out of its grasp.
We will be watching to see what happens. Thanks for your time, Jacob.
Thanks.
Visit gpfcircle.com to purchase the complete audio package from Rising and Falling Powers, the Geopolitical Futures Conference held in New York City. Again, visit gpfcircle.com to purchase the complete audio package.